Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Joel Runyon, and today we are talking about impossible lists, what they are, how I've used them to change my life, and how you can start using them to live more interesting stories starting today. But before we get into it, hit like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more videos. And if you have an impossible list already, drop it in the comments below. One of the first things I did when starting my blog was creating an impossible list. I was starting off at a place where I was living in my parents' basement and I wasn't doing much with my life. I got fired from UPS, couldn't get a job at Target, Starbucks wouldn't call me back, and everything that I wanted to do felt impossible. I wanted to travel the world, start a business, and do a bunch of things, but I literally couldn't even get a job at Starbucks. So how was I gonna do all those different things if I couldn't even get an entry-level position in the service industry? That's a great question. Basically, I started from scratch. I had a list of things and written it down somewhere that I felt like were impossible. Maybe you've done something like that before. And I was going through the list and I couldn't do anything. I had reasons for why I couldn't start a business, reasons why I couldn't travel the world, but at the very bottom of the list, I had a small task. It said run a triathlon. I didn't know anything about triathlons. I didn't know anybody who had run a triathlon before. I barely even knew what 3 sports were involved in a triathlon. But while I had excuses for why I couldn't travel the world or why I didn't have money to start a business, I had 0 excuses for why I couldn't go out and run around my block or get on my bike from middle school, literally from middle school, and ride around the block, training for this indoor triathlon in Schaumburg, Illinois. So even though I didn't have any excuses holding me back, I still didn't do it for a couple of months. Eventually, I ran out of Netflix shows to watch, and I came back to the list, and I realized I should just go and try and see what happens. I trained for about a month for this indoor triathlon. It was a 10-minute swim in a pool, a 30-minute bike ride on an indoor bike, and a 20-minute run on a treadmill indoors. It's literally the easiest triathlon I could have ever picked, and I finished it, and I remember thinking to myself at the beginning, you spent so much time telling yourself that this was impossible, and you just did it. If that's the case, what other things are out there that you keep telling yourself are impossible, and if you just trained for it and just went after it, you'd be able to pull it off? So I started building out my list. I did a sprint triathlon, I did an Olympic triathlon, I eventually did a half Ironman, and at that point, I basically faked my way into becoming a runner. I never thought about myself as a runner before that, but after you run a half marathon in the middle of a half Ironman, you start to realize, hey, I guess I'm running kind of a lot. So I started doing more races. I did a half marathon, a marathon, ultra marathons, and eventually an ultra marathon on every single continent. And then took the same approach in the job, getting promotion after promotion, and eventually leaving to do my own thing. But no matter the new thing that I do, it all started with that small indoor triathlon in Schaumburg, Illinois, and that one piece of paper called my impossible list. And sometimes when people talk about impossible lists, they group it together with bucket lists. You're probably familiar with a bucket list. You get real excited at one point, you write down all the things you want to do before you die, and then eventually you don't do anything. The problem with a bucket list is it's really aspirational, but not really actionable. It ends up as a lot of things on a piece of paper that you want to do someday, with nothing that you can start on today. So with an impossible list, we basically invert that completely. An impossible list starts off where you're at with all the things that seem impossible to you right now. Sometimes it's not as sexy or glamorous as a bucket list, but it's also way more practical because you can start on it today. For me, I had these bigger aspirational goals that I wanted to do someday, but I knew I couldn't travel the world or start my own business right away. But I could definitely go to the gym and start training. And even if I couldn't do that, I could still run around the block. So while the bucket list focuses on the things that you want to do before you die, the impossible list helps orient your brain around what actions can you take today so you can actually live the life that you say you want to live. Now, I'll get into building out your own impossible list in another video. I want to break down templates and tools you can use to build your own impossible list, and also highlight other impossible lists that people have made over the years. But if you want to get started today, here's a couple things you can do to get started with your own impossible list. First of all, don't think too big. It's okay to start where you're at with something that feels difficult or challenging where you're at right now. If you've never worked out before, you don't have to put an Ironman triathlon on the list. You can start with a sprint triathlon, or even just going to the gym. If you've never done comedy before, you don't have to say get a Netflix special. You can start with going to an open mic. It's okay. But the key is to have something that's difficult, challenging, and maybe seems impossible, but is still approachable and you can still take action on it today. The other thing you should do is break it out into categories. Typically what I have on my list is broken out into fitness, business, life, and just general Renaissance man activities. My brain moves really fast, so it's nice to have a little bit of variety of things you can pull from. Another important thing to remember about the impossible list is that you should document it somewhere. One of the best things about an impossible list is that it gives you real world data. It shows empirical evidence that you can do the things that you used to think you weren't able to do. And so when you're able to document that on a Notion template, on a blog post, on an Instagram page, or somewhere else, anytime you have doubt about the next impossible thing you want to do, you can always go look back on your memories, your stories, and the challenges that you've already overcome, and remind yourself that you can keep pushing forward and do the things that you don't think you can do. And the last main point about an impossible list is while a bucket list is super aspirational, it doesn't take into account the costs and the sacrifices you're going to have to make it happen. Now, some of those things might just be money. Some of them might be time. Some of them might be a lot more. But with a bucket list, there's not a lot of consideration of what it's going to take to achieve those goals. And with an impossible list, you should take a look at those up front, decide if they're worth the trade-off, and then if they are, go make that exchange. The very last thing about an impossible list is that you should start, probably today. It doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't have to be set in stone. The great thing about an impossible list is that it's meant to change over time. So as you grow and become more capable, you should be able to add more things to your impossible list. You can keep pushing your limits and doing more and more things that seem impossible. And over time, you build this collection of stories, adventures, and challenges that you're building out as part of your life. If anyone has any confusion about it, this is the video to watch. I hope you guys like that video. I'm gonna be doing a lot more videos about this, about impossible lists, and other challenges that I'm taking on in the upcoming months. So stay tuned. If you guys like this video, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I appreciate it. And I will see you on the next video. Out.